Welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, Netflix is buying Warner Brothers. So does that mean live cycling will be coming to Netflix? I'll be looking into that, as well as wrapping up the third round of the UCI Cyclocross World Cup from Sardinia and all the other news from the world of pro cycling. This week in the world of racing, we learned that Premier Tech has already found a major new team to sponsor. So as of next year, Mathieu van der Poel and his teammates will ride for Alpecin Premier Tech, whilst Puk Pieterse and her teammates will ride for Phoenix Premier Tech. With that news came the announcement of a heap of signings, more on that later on. We also learned that if you want to significantly increase the value of your bike, all you need to do is get Tadej Pogačar to ride it. His raw carbon Colnago Y1 RS, which he used on some of the mountainous stages of this year's Tour de France, just sold at auction on Sotheby's last week for over $190,000, which is around 10 times its retail value. And finally this week, we learned that Netflix is acquiring Warner Brothers, which is massive news in the streaming and content business. Netflix is the biggest streaming-specific service in the world, whilst Warner Brothers Discovery, as it is currently, is one of the next biggest. As cycling fans, though, the immediate question that came to mind was, does this mean that I'll get to watch bike racing live on my Netflix subscription? Well, the answer to that is probably not, based on the details we currently have of this acquisition, but possibly in some territories. Bear with me. The deal that Netflix has done is to acquire Warner Brothers, but not Discovery. I mean, that's simplifying things just a bit, but you get the gist. Those two companies merged back in 2022, but then back in June of this year, WBD CEO David Zaslav revealed they were planning on demerging, separating its streaming and studios from its global networks divisions. I'll explain what that means shortly. Soon after that announcement, Paramount came sniffing, reportedly looking to buy the entire corporation before it demerged. That was in late September, but it was an offer that was quickly rejected by WBD, who then opened up a formal bidding process in late October. And that was the first point at which Netflix's intentions started to surface publicly. Those intentions became concrete on Friday just gone, when Netflix announced that the two parties had come to an agreement. Netflix is buying Warner Brothers for a total of $82.7 billion, with around $11 billion of that being acquired debt. But what Netflix is buying, according to what's been reported so far, is Warner Brothers' most valuable assets, namely Warner Brothers Studios, which owns the likes of Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Batman, Superman, The Matrix, and many others, and also HBO and HBO Max, which includes titles such as The Sopranos, Sex and the City, Succession, Game of Thrones, White Lotus, Friends, The Big Bang Theory, etc., etc. Effectively, Netflix is buying a lot of heritage titles that it has historically lacked, and if that deal goes through, it will then own those titles outright rather than having to kind of lease them from rights owners for specified periods of time, as it has done with some films and series in the past. What Netflix is not acquiring is WBD's cable network, so CNN, Discovery Channel, the Cartoon Network amongst those, and crucially for us as cycling fans, Eurosport and Discovery Plus. Whilst Eurosport is no longer a thing here in the UK and over in Ireland, it is still the service that broadcasts cycling in most of continental Europe, including France, Germany, Italy and Spain. Since Eurosport is part of the spin-off company that's not being acquired, it's very unlikely you'll be watching live bike racing on Netflix anytime soon, at least in those territories. However, where the water becomes a little more muddied is when it comes to TNT. So according to an article on The Guardian, TNT Sports US is part of the Global Networks division, along with CNN, Eurosport, etc. But TNT Sports International, which includes TNT Sport in the UK and Ireland, is part of the Netflix acquisition. If that is the case, then Netflix would gain control of the sports rights that TNT currently has in the UK and Ireland, which includes football, cricket, rugby, and pretty much every professional bike race on the calendar. So, there is a chance, but as things stand, we don't really know the exact details, and whilst we could speculate, it feels as though there's not that much point doing that at this stage, because there's so much that could emerge about the deal or even change about the deal between now and Q3 next year, which is when Netflix and WBD expect that deal to complete. Based on what I've listened to and read so far, there's also a possibility that the deal won't go through at all. It's expected to face significant scrutiny from competition regulators in the US and Europe due to fear it becomes a massive monopoly that reduces competition in the streaming world, giving Netflix too much control over prices and movie releases. And President Trump has already weighed in on the matter, saying just yesterday that he'd be personally involved in the decision about whether the US government would approve the takeover. So watch this space, effectively. Just don't get your hopes up you'll be able to watch live cycling as part of your Netflix subscription anytime soon. As ever, I would be very interested to read your thoughts on the subject, which you can leave in the comment section just below this video. Okay, shall we move on to some actual bike racing now? Contrary to what I said on last week's show, not sure what I was thinking there, the UCI Cyclocross World Cup did continue at the weekend, with round 3 taking place in Sicily in Italy. It made for some quite unseasonable weather conditions for the riders, close to 20 degrees for the races, which I'm sure came as a welcome break from the normal Northern European winter. The men's race was run off almost like a criterium, with a group of around 10 riders at the front for the majority of it. Joris Nieuwenhuis had taken control on the early laps, but realising that he hadn't been able to split it, he settled into the front positions without being on the front as much as he had been. Michael van Torenhout and Laurens Sweeck were the other two who were constantly in the first few positions of that group, and it was those three who'd end up fighting it out for the win. Van Torenhout attacked in the closing quarter of a lap there or thereabouts, enough to gap the other two before the final time up the stairs, and that was enough for him to take his first World Cup win of the season. Sweeck's third place on the day behind Nieuwenhuis wasn't quite enough to unseat Thibaut Nation atop of the overall standings in the UCI World Cup, despite him skipping yesterday's round. It was much more clear-cut in the women's race, where Lucinda Brown once again rode away from everybody else. She came to the line 20 seconds in front of Aniek van Alphen, but her consistency over the first 3 rounds means that she still leads the series overall. Also, it was great to see Shirin van Androoy in third place on the day. That was her first podium at a World Cup race since January 2023, believe it or not. Don't forget, you can watch a full season of bike racing live on Discovery Plus or Max. And this week, that's going to include the Exact Cross in Kortrijk on Saturday and the UCI World Cup in Namur on Sunday. And Namur is always a cracking race. I'll definitely be tuning in for that one. So on to transfer news now, and I'll start with all those signings at Alpecin and Phoenix Premier Tech. The men's team have signed 9 riders, including veteran classic specialist Florian Seneschal from Arkea, Ugo Uhl from IPT, sprinter Gerben Thijssen and Francesco Bussato, both from Intermarché, whilst the women's team have signed Lotte Klaas from Arkea and Marlene de Zoeter from Sirotti, both of which are teams who are both folding. Other Intermarché riders who have found a new home ahead of the Lotto merger include Arne Marit, who completes Red Bull Bora Hansgrohe's 2026 lineup, and Dries de Putter, who moved to Jayco Alula. The Australian squad have also signed Rudy Porter, who was with them in 2023 and 2024 before finding himself without a contract this year. Meanwhile, Ninka Vinca has signed a 3-year contract with Team SD Works Pro Time, and Uruguayan Guillermo Thomas Silva has signed with XDS Astana from Caja Rural. Okay, that's all, folks. See you again next Monday.